Welcome back to the program. We've just been listening in to the press conference with the EU Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky ahead of a virtual meeting of European leaders, the so-called Coalition of the Willing, which is set to get underway very soon. To help me unpack all that, I have in the studio with me our International Affairs Editor, Kethevane Gorjestani. Good to see you, Kethevane. So, Ursula von der Leyen, let's begin with her first. She struck a very she showed a very united front. She said that Ukraine can always count on Europe. She also emphasized the need for strong security guarantees for Ukraine and that the Coalition of the Willing stands ready to do its share. Talk us through the key takeaways of what we've just heard.
Well, look, she was basically outlining all of the elements that the Europeans have been really repeating over and over again since basically the beginning of this full-scale invasion, and something that they're likely going to be repeating in Washington in front of Donald Trump. This issue of the strong security guarantees, of course, is at the heart of the Coalition of the Willing, that meeting that they were actually running to, and that's why they were not taking more questions. That's going to be a key issue. She also reiterated Europe's position on the territorial integrity of Ukraine, on the fact that they would not accept any limitations to Ukrainian armed forces. All of these things are sort of in response to what Russia has been demanding, which is limiting the armed forces of Ukraine, challenging the territorial integrity, all of these things. One element that she really focused on when it comes to the security guarantees is this idea of saying that Donald Trump sort of hinted at the possibility that the U.S. would in a way get involved in those security guarantees. They even talked about an Article 5-like security guarantee. Article 5, of course, is this rule for NATO members, which Ukraine is not part of, that says that an attack on one is an attack on all. So what she did there was sort of set the scene for this next sequence of the events, this Coalition of the Willing meeting, and then that meeting in Washington with many of them going to D.C. with Volodymyr Zelensky.
And President Zelensky, meanwhile, he put an emphasis on Russia's unwillingness to end the war, and he also said that new sanctions against Moscow would be necessary in the case of Moscow refusing the cessation of hostilities. Now, he will be traveling to Washington tomorrow, that's Monday, but this time he'll have a whole entourage of European leaders behind him.
Absolutely. And of course, there is in the back of everyone's mind the last time he went to Washington, that disastrous meeting in the Oval Office in February. One of the reporters actually asked him about how he was feeling going into this meeting. And it shows that the Europeans want strength in numbers. Volodymyr Zelensky is going in there basically with his bodyguards, the European leaders, to try to get Donald Trump on his side. He said very clearly, we need the U.S. on our side, and that's exactly what they're going to try to do, what they're going to try to push for, especially when it comes to the security guarantees and the issue of territorial concessions that Donald Trump seems to be hinting at, that he would agree with Vladimir Putin when he says, well, if you give me this part of Ukraine, I will let go of this part of Ukraine. So Volodymyr Zelensky is really counting on the Europeans to help him out. And when you look at the list of European leaders, and I'll end with that, about who is going with Zelensky, you have, on the one hand, the sort of big powers of Europe and the leaders of that Coalition of the Willing, Emmanuel Macron of France, Keir Starmer of the UK, and Chancellor Friedrich Merz of Germany. But you also have three other leaders, the President of Finland, the Secretary General of NATO, and the Prime Minister of Italy. These three are considered to be the sort of Trump whisperers, the people in Europe that get along most with Donald Trump. So this is about showing power of the Europeans and support for Zelensky, but also bringing in the people who know how to talk to Donald Trump and who seem to have an in with the U.S. president.
Kethevane, thank you very much for your analysis.